James Franklin is fired. He's no longer the head coach of Penn State football. State College has made a decision to move off of James Franklin, $50 million. Now let's talk about the past. Let's talk about the present. And let's talk about the future when talking about James Franklin in Penn State football. He is 78-36 during his time at Penn State, 6 10-win seasons, a 2016 Big Ten championship, a college football playoff appearance where he got a game away, honestly, a couple plays away from a national championship. And I think when talking about Penn State, at the time that James Franklin became the head coach of this program, they were dead in the water. They had the scandals. And the fact that he came from Vanderbilt and was able to turn around this program obviously is not going to be something that people are going to talk about right now. They're probably not going to talk about it in a month from now. But I think as we look back at the time that Franklin had put into this program and to be able to get it to a perennial 10-win season type of program, obviously not getting all the way to the finish line, should be given credit to him. Because if you really dive into the makeup of what was going on at Penn State, I think you would really understand the lack of maturity the program had and the fact that he was able to get it there. And I want to make sure that's being very clear. Going into the season and in years prior, I had been one to defend Franklin and say just because he hasn't done it doesn't mean he can't. That this, notion that he can't win the big game, there's a lot of teams that don't win the big games. We said that Ryan Day couldn't get to the finish line and then he did it the year prior. But when we talk about the present and we talk about what Penn State is in 2025, you ran out of excuses. You ran out of rope to use. And once you fell with speed and you fell quick. And this 3-game skid by Penn State was, I honestly don't have words for it. Because I had built out my script and what we were going to talk about today based on just the Northwestern game, but we have to broaden it out. Oregon broke them. And I think I said it in last week's video or last week's shows. I said the Oregon game was just the snowball at the top of the mountain that got pushed down. And then UCLA happened, Northwestern happened. What's wild to me is you had this microcosm of everything's working in your favor in terms of scheduling dynamics, roster, just maturity of that roster with who was coming back with Aller, Catron, Nicholas Singleton. You bring in Trevor Pena from Syracuse, the guy that's supposed to be an NFL wide receiver. Finally, we have a weapon on the outside. You have a defense with a defensive coordinator in Jim Knowles who just won a national championship. So not only do you have continuity, you also did the cherry and the whipped cream on top with the transfer portal additions. So all of this was culminating into the 2025 season that Penn State had earmarked as this is the year. Not only that, when I say the microcosm, I say Oregon, the whiteout at night. You avoided big noon kickoff. You have Oregon traveling across the country. You have all of this earmarked for the game. This is the opportunity. If you don't do it now, you will never do it. And I think that truly got into the heads of Penn State football from top to bottom. He lost the locker room. I hate that term. I hate how generic it is. What does losing the locker room mean? This is the best depiction you can think of when talking about what is losing the locker room. Because at the end of the day, Franklin, you can't turn this around. Now, we do have to talk about the fact that Drew Aller injured, out for the season, 3 minutes left in the fourth. We could say maybe they win that game still, but this team is broken from top to bottom. And if you're Penn State, you look at this and you just say, if you weren't able to do it when everything was finally working in your favor, When are you going to do it? That's the honest to God truth. When is it going to happen? And at the end of the day, your answer is more than likely it's just not going to happen with you. We thank you for where you took this program, coming from Vanderbilt, being able to turn it around. I mean, he's a legend in Penn State history books, for better and for worse. Curt Cignetti, at his time at Indiana, has more top 10 wins than he did in his 10 years at Penn State. I think even in just this year alone, Curt Cignetti has more top 10 wins. So when we talk about the future, I don't know what James Franklin does. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a program builder. I think a team that feels like they're broken, he'd be a great candidate to go pull from. But then you always have this in the back of your mind of, do we have a ceiling with him? Maybe he takes time off. I think he'd be a fine or damn good TV commentator. I mean, that's the go-to for coaches that have flamed out or get fired. I also want to say how wild it is. $50 million. I mean, preaching to the choir here. You see the A&M pennant behind me, Jimbo Fisher's buyout, but Jimbo Fisher was having below 500 seasons. Paying $50 million for a guy that's not getting you to a national championship, that signals to me a couple things. That signals to me, A, that they're not going to mess around with this coaching candidate, that they want to go find a guy that's going to get the job done. That's why when you hear the names I'm going to list out in terms of candidacy, they're going to be a little wild, because I think Penn State's going to throw some money at them. Now, I don't know the details of Penn State in terms of their NIL funding. They're definitely going to have a little bit more budget, just solely off the fact that recruiting's going to take a hit, and it's already taken a hit. What, an hour since the announcement, we've seen 2 decommitments. Now, a couple of them from later classes, which makes sense when you're not wanting to commit to a team for 2 years and you don't even know who the head coach is. I really begin to wonder, maybe with Drew Aller, he could come back, I think, for one more year, if I'm remembering correctly, and maybe transfer. But this era for Penn State, it's time to close this chapter. And I think they made that decision for Penn State fans. The fact that they did it mid-season, the fact that they even did it at all and clicked the reset button, because there are so many teams across the country that would be just fine living at 10-win purgatory. Because 10-win purgatory is maybe a handful of teams out of everyone else, out of the 136 that are there. Not a lot of people can get to 10 wins. Even Texas A&M can't get to 10 wins, and they have all that money invested. But if you are serious, you make this type of move, and they did. And I don't know what James Franklin goes and does. But here are 3 names that I could see and have already been linked to the job. Now, obviously, we'll react to it. I don't want to make this a weekly segment of who potentially could get the job. My rule with coaching candidacy is I'm going to name the guys that have been rumored early, and then we're going to wait until a hire happens. Number 1 is Curt Cignetti. Curt Cignetti, a Pennsylvania native. His buyout goes from $13 million to $10 million as soon as December 1st happens. There's a lot of connections there. Now, I know Cignetti likes, of course, Indiana, but at the end of the day, Indiana, not a football school. They're basketball. That's where the money is. Same with North Carolina. That's where the money is. Now, they could pull together and keep him around, and maybe he loves Indiana. Maybe he's a family man. He doesn't want to uproot his family, but it's a hard bargain to not have to go to Penn State where you could go win a national championship. Maybe Cignetti believes he could do that at Indiana. Not 100% sure. Someone in the comments said Deion Sanders. I don't even know if Deion's going to want to coach with some of his medical history. That's my big concern. That's why I don't bring up Deion Sanders as a coach in terms of future coaching jobs, just because I worry for his health. Matt Rule is going to be a guy that people question if Nebraska can hold on to it in 2025 in terms of his contract and the resources that Nebraska is going to bring. I think he's happy where he is, and I think he's going to see through the Dylan Raiola era and see if this is going to be the long-term solution. I'd be curious if he sticks to the college game. He already dipped his toes in the NFL, burned out. So I'd be shocked if he tried to go back into those waters. But I think he's comfortable at Nebraska. But like I said, if Penn State's willing to pay the $50 million to get off of James Franklin, to start this search early, what's to say that anybody's on the table, not named Dan Lanning, Kalen DeBoer, Kirby Smart, you know the guys, obviously Ryan Day. But there's a lot of coaches that you may not be thinking of that could be on the table. I think the safe option, the one that if you want to go with the comfort guy, maybe you don't have as much money as Manny Diaz out of Duke. He's done a good job since his time as an assistant for Penn State. I think Penn State fans would not be okay with that option. Like I said, if you're putting that much money to get rid of the guy, you better hope that you hit on the guy that you're bringing in, that he can take you to that next gear. And like I said before, 10 wins, 10-win purgatory, that's not an area that a lot of coaches are in, let alone a guy that's going to be available that can get you to that next year. You're going to have to vet and make sure he is the right one, or this is all going to be crashing down very quickly.